Welcome back to the Fire Break. I'm Steve Wolf. As you know, the Fire Break is sponsored by Team Wildfire, developing innovative strategies for dealing with the big old wildfire problem out there. Well, luckily, lots of other people are working on that problem. And one of the incentives, as if not having your planet burn up wasn't enough incentive, is the XPRIZE. And, we had Andrea Santi on the show previously discussing that. Well, it turns out that just down the block from me is Jay Stalnacker, who's also working on the XPRIZE. Not as a competitor, but actually working for XPRIZE. And he's the former fire manager in Boulder County. A lot of experience in emergency management and related areas. So that kind of dovetails in pretty well. Jay, welcome to the Fire Break. How are you today?
Uh, Good morning. I'm doing great, thanks.
It is morning. That's right. I forgot. It's a Monday morning of all things. So kudos. So tell me a little bit about what you're working on now.
Currently I'm the technical lead for the XPRIZE Wildfire, and I think if folks listen to your podcast with Andrea, I'm sure you guys covered XPRIZE in detail. At least I hope so. But we could go there if you'd like. But my specific role in the wildfire competition is to manage the testing and the judging. So, in other words, I develop the tests that the competitors will be using, and this is pretty fun role if you can imagine. It's like creating huge, exercises in emergency management. Just large scale exercise kind of development, but. That's one role, and then the other role is I don't physically, or I should say, I don't judge myself, but I coordinate the judging panel. So we identify judges, international judges, and then we kind of give them the tools they need to do their job and judge the teams.
Okay. Just like you build the racetrack and you paint the lines on it, but you're not in charge of saying who won the race.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Okay. So you're building this basically like a really cool emergency theme park. And then the
Yes.
competitors will come and see how they perform in it. So on the Wildfire X Prize, it's my understanding, to let me know here, that you're going to set out like a 20 by 20 mile-ish square area, about 1,000 square kilometers. And then you're going to light a fire or two in there, right? A real fire and maybe a Girl Scout campfire type thing. And then competitors have to distinguish between the real fire and the decoy fire, and put it out within 10 minutes. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot more nuances to it, as I think you probably recall. But there's a track A and a track B within the competition. Track A is the satellite detection track, and what you're describing is more the testing scenarios for track B, which is the autonomous response track. And in that track, teams are being challenged, as you just said, within 10 minutes to autonomously detect, navigate to, and suppress an incipient stage destructive wildfire. A lot of key words there, right? Autonomous is the first one.
Yep.
It's a focus, on what we're not doing currently. So, although we are using drone technology now, finally in fire, it's man droned. And in other words, we have to have a pilot operating it. And what we're doing is pushing that envelope to beyond visual line of sight and autonomous, meaning only human in the loop to cancel something if it's a hazard or a safety issue, which is a giant step forward in the wildfire industry, at least.
Sure.
And so that's the one key word. I'll say one more key word, which was destructive wildfire. So I hope that our listeners understand that there is such thing as good fire, bad fire, and there always should be. Fire is a natural disturbance of our natural ecosystem. Because of the values at risk that we've introduced to that ecosystem, there's now a conflict. And that doesn't mean that all fire is bad, and it doesn't mean that all fire should be let burn. So we use the word destructive fire, and destructive fire are these deadly fires, these property, life-threatening, even ecologically threatening fires, such as the fires in Australia, where entire species were almost eliminated due to wildfire. That's not good fire.
Yeah, right. So good fire is fire that kind of restores the natural balance before we allowed to the forest, before we force the forest to overgrow by putting out every fire. And bad fire are the fires that threaten our values at risk, right? Anything that someone's going to have to write a check to replace, or uh, a
or
species that
worse.
won't come back,
Yeah.
right? Right, or compensation for lives lost. Uh,
Yes.
that's bad fire. So you're saying basically, like, the fires are kind of like attorneys, right? There's like good ones, there's bad ones. Many of them should be put down, but
I,
not
I
all of
I
them.
I have some friends that are attorneys.
So do I. My
I
best
was
friend's an
I
attorney.
was a former law enforcement officer, so I appreciate the work that attorneys do. But like anything, there's good and bad people, right? I don't
Right.
think we need to focus on attorneys or anybody in particular. But yeah, the good fire thing was a passion of mine in Boulder County. I put more prescribed fire down on the landscape in Colorado than any other agency at the time. And in an area, as you know, that you live, that is highly valued for many reasons. It's beauty, it's natural beauty, it's technology industry, it's communities, and to be able to put fire down and deal with the smoke issues in Colorado was sort of like a career highlight for me when I left. We were really able to make some differences. Um, you know, then we look at these destructive fires, and as you probably, I don't know your time in Boulder there, but throughout my 15, 16 years there, I was part of three or four of the largest wildfires, most destructive wildfires in Colorado at that
At
time,
the
and
time, right.
it
Yeah.
just kept escalating, and that was just the sign that we're not really doing something right. I also served on the Type 1 teams as an operations section chief, and uh, that experience opened my eyes to the problem at a very large scale. And that's where the XPRIZE kind of came in for me later in life.
So it looks, a lot of people, I think, when they read that, I don't know, with track 2, track B part of the X Prize Fire, Wildfire Prize, had a first response like, that's not even possible. Like, if you're looking at a 20 by 20 grid, you could technically be 23 miles from where the fire starts if you had to make the diagonal, and just to get there, if you left a few minutes for suppression, you'd have to be moving at hundreds of miles an hour, etc. And so the first thing I noticed that the X Prize does is that it forces you to think outside the box, right? It's like, okay, well, what if there were a technology? What would that look like? Would that be, you know, I'm I'm sure the military has, missiles that could cover that distance accurately and target, a heat source. It's like a heat-seeking missile, but with fire retardant in it, or right, like a lot of, there's other ways to look at it, beyond the 6,000-year-old, medieval tools that we fight wildfire with now. And so I think it serves its purpose, regardless actually of what happens, whether anyone meets that goal within the allotted time period of the competition. Um, just the fact that people are trying, that they're turning over new ideas about it, which involves rejecting some old ideas. Uh, so I think it's very purposeful. How did you get
Uh,
involved with X Prize?
well, I appreciate you saying all that, though. That is as Colin Peartree, who's on our XPRIZE team. He always says XPRIZE draws the box that you need to think outside of.
Yes.
So our box is pretty audacious, as you said. Now you need to think outside the box, because if you're thinking in the box, then you're not going to solve this. And that's some of the things you said. Were the first responses I even had. I've been in fire management, emergency management for over 30 years. I am definitely old school. And I was having a hard time struggling with um, the culture of fire. Like, how are we going to get the culture of fire to accept these technologies that we anticipate? Number one. Number two, when I joined XPRIZE, I struggled with why are we focused on this problem? There's about 10,000 more other problems that you and I could talk about for weeks on end. in wildfire, building construction, for example, zoning and planning of developments and so on and so forth. But the science behind our competition was really impressive to me. And as a fire manager and a prescribed fire practitioner, I rely heavily on science. I really, really embraced it. And to know that, we did almost 2 years of research behind the competition to determine that problem you just described, destructive wildfire, incipient stage destructive wildfire. If we can eliminate that, we don't for sure eliminate all wildfires. Destructive wildfires are 1% of 10% of all bad fires, which are 90% all human caused fires. I mean, you can break that down, but it's a very small percentage, but a very high number as far as cost to us, lives and property and ecological damage. So it is a great problem to work on, right? It's like the Johara window, the unknown unknowns. We're in the
Yeah,
unknown
that's right.
unknowns.
How
Yeah.
do you know if the
So
cat's still alive? Right.
yeah. Well, now we're getting the quantum physics, right? Yeah. So I think that for me, it was a random. It's a funny story if you have time, but long story really short is my daughter was applying to CU and a bunch of other colleges. She just graduated, and she had a final project around LinkedIn or something. And I was, well, geez, I haven't updated my LinkedIn ever. So I went in and I updated my LinkedIn, and just sort of as an example to my daughter, like, hey, this is how cool people do it, right? And
Facebook for business, right?
yeah, well, within months, I had a bunch of, job opportunities unsolicited, and XPRIZE came across my LinkedIn, and I for sure thought it was fake. I couldn't put my head around it. Like, what is this? And I applied, and months went by, but eventually, I actually met my now boss, our domain, our vice president. Of our domain in biodiversity and conservation, Peter Houlihan, and the man's amazing. He's a National Geographic explorer, and we really connected, with all our backgrounds, extreme backgrounds. I was a smoke jumper. He's done some crazy stuff, and, it just, we really connected, and the passion around conservation connected with me. And Peter has a vision that XPRIZE, everyone in XPRIZE shares, which is we can make a difference in this world. And
Yeah.
that's unique, man. Right? Coming from fire management where we're type 1 teams, especially where we come in after the disaster and pretty much cleaning up the mess as much as we can. This is something way different. This is out front of that disaster. And oh my goodness. They're like, we could make a difference. And that gives me chills just talking to you, when saying it out loud.
And it should, right? Yeah, but I think that early in anyone's career, and hopefully continuing on into it, foremost it's the desire to make a difference. I mean, you ask any graduating, when your daughter graduated, I'm sure if you asked the people in her class, hey, what are your plans in life? I just want to make a difference, right? So that's that's a big motivation, and for some people that motivation never goes away, which is really beautiful. So I'm wondering, just to go back on a tech detail there, it said, an incipient fire of destructive nature. Okay, well, when the fire's incipient or, in its nascent stage, how do you know if it's destined to grow up to become a destructive fire or not? So might that require then that you also model that fire very quickly early? Because it might be a nascent fire that, starts 500 yards from the beach and the winds are going towards the ocean. Okay, so that
So
could grow to be a fire, but it's going to go out pretty soon on its own. It's going to run out of fuel.
I mean, you just answered the question in my mind, and I'm not sure if you were on our discussion with the teams as we announced the QTS and shared the qualified technical submission questions, and this is a holistic approach, and if competing teams are not using fire managers or even land managers, weather experts in their team sort of structure, they're in trouble because the answer's in front of us. What is an incipient stage fire? It's a fire that it just started. Well, then how the heck would you know? You can't model that. Of course you can't. But what you can do is you can look around the environment. As
Right.
you just described, that's an environment on a beach, fire with the wind to its back, moving towards the water. I wouldn't call that a destructive wildfire. So there are a lot of other key indicators that currently exist, and there's models that exist, great ones, to be honest with you, um, that things like Dr. Janice Cohen, I'm sure you know her name, but she's one of our judges. She
Okay.
has she has an outstanding fire model for doing stuff like this. So the technology and the information is there.
Right.
We as fire managers have failed to just capitalize on it and bring it. We would rather, well, I wouldn't say rather, but right now we're in the cycle, as you described, of spending billions of dollars after the disaster. How about we spend half of that before the disaster? Just
Yeah.
half,
And not have
maybe
the
even
disaster.
less, right?
Oh yeah,
Maybe
I'm
even
sure much
less,
less, right?
right? And so you did a good job in the beginning introduction. It is a big cultural shift for the communities we serve and for the firemen and women, the public safety providers. It is a huge culture shift to say that, oh no, we're going to take control of this problem instead of, oh my gosh, we're victims, and we need to get out of that victim mindset, and we need to become guardians of our subdivisions, guardians of our ecological wonders and natural wonders, and guardianship means protecting them.
Yeah. And I think we're going to need to see new people coming into the space that don't
Yes.
come from the fire space, right? Because
Yes.
right, the people who are competing in XPRIZE, like they are not, seasoned firefighters, right? They're scientists, they're innovators, and we're going to need to create a culture where their contribution is welcome in that industry. Right. It's like,
Yeah,
I got my
absolutely.
stuff. I've been doing this 40 years. I don't need some
Yeah,
knucklehead scientist coming in here tell me how to put this fire down.
Well, imagine, I'm in Boulder, as the
Yep.
fire management officer for the entire county. I'd say at least once a week, I had somebody come into my office and throw something at me technology wise that, I would consider Boulder a pretty progressive environment, and the community is extremely supportive to fire management and wildfire in particular. So we were able to take advantage of those opportunities sometimes. But
Yeah.
what innovators don't realize is that as we are missing some of their knowledge on the technology's capabilities, they are missing some of our knowledge on um, the life safety of fire.
Yeah.
And I know they know, but it's like, I can't really test your idea on a real fire. Well, why not? Well, because what if it doesn't work? We're testing your idea. And I'll bring that back to XPRIZE. That's why XPRIZE is successful. In all our competitions, we give the teams that compete an opportunity to compete in a real environment, not a
Yeah.
lab, not a fuel bed that's constructed in a box,
Right.
which is great for science, for science. Like, that's
Right.
how we developed our Nomex and our fire shelters. Yes. But to truly test a fire shelter, what did they do? They took it into the Canadian forest and ran a crown fire around those fire shelters because they had to put it in the real environment.
Yeah.
And that's what we're going to do for teams like yours, is we're going to put you in the real environment. Um, and that is unique because that creates an opportunity for you to prove your technology, for the teams to demonstrate reliability, to troubleshoot issues when the risks are minimized, and then to use all that to get investors now and end users, right?
Right.
Because now for the VCs and the investors, you've proven your concept in the field, instead of it's just a concept.
Right.
And a lot of folks don't join XPRIZE, meaning the teams, for the money. They
Yeah.
actually join it for this opportunity I just described, ironically, or good in a good way.
Yeah. No, it's a great opportunity to have somebody setting up a realistic test in situ to, put your tech to the test. Which would the cost of doing that, it could be
Oh,
done, right? You could go off and buy some land somewhere and do it. But that would really be prohibitive for most of these teams.
yeah, and to have an independent opportunity, this test is independent. The judges are independent of us at XPRIZE, so these teams are truly getting looked at They're going to have, we're approaching this scientifically, as I mentioned. There's scientific testing designs. We're working with agencies like NIST NIST, the FAA, and other organizations where these teams. It would take years for these competitors to get the right permitting and the
Build those
opportunity to test.
relationships. Yeah.
Yeah, and that is another, just positive with XPRIZE is we have no social political agenda here except to solve a good problem. And so a lot of people just want to partner with us. Government organizations, private entities like the Moore Foundation, the Minderoo Foundation in Australia, New South Wales Rural Fire Service in Australia is one of our big partners. We'll be testing over there. So there's a lot of opportunity to bring a lot of, as you just said, a lot of outsiders into this really tight-knit, closed-minded wildfire community. And I'm one of them, so I could say that,
Yeah, right. So a successful team would likely incorporate people from both camps, right?
Absolutely.
You would either have in person, people from the wildfire community, or what I think is the next gen on this is going to be an AI version that combines the wisdom of every great incident commander that's been.
Wow,
Right?
huh? Bill Honenberg comes to mind, John Giller, all these Type 1, NEMO, ICs. Yeah, if you could capture their knowledge, one of our judges, Shauna Lagarza, that name should ring a bell with some of your audience members, but she's just to capture a little bit of what she knows about fire management and then put it into that model of thinking. Because as you just said, the autonomous part, the AI part is the other new thing that we're introducing into the competition. Is this thing that teams bring to the table, the solution has to think too. It just doesn't, it's not pre-programmed. It's got to think, it's got to make that decision. Is this a fire moving towards the water on a beach, or is this a fire downslope of a subdivision with heavy ladder fuels and high winds? There's thinking there, and all that, as we're all witnessing today, is possible. I traveled the world the last year, very fortunate, I have to say, and met with fire managers across the world. And to your point, technologists and scientists from across the world. And the connectivity that we all have is there, believe it or not. Whether there's no language barrier when it comes to this problem.
Right.
There's no cultural barrier when it comes to this problem. There's just people that want to solve it. And again, that's exciting. It's exciting. And the AI is going to be one of the biggest challenges in the competition. As the test designer, that was one of how do you test AI? How do you prove that AI is doing what it says it's going to do? So there's a lot of things on our end, on the backside, that take a lot of work. And thank goodness we have all these great partners, to help us with that.
I think the AI part of the current XPRIZE won't be that challenging, right? We need to, detect the heat source, figure out where the front of that is, what direction it's moving in, and lay down suppression or retardant in that spot. So that, as AI goes, that's a pretty constrained problem.
All right, I like your attitude. I would add, what we've heard, and maybe that, and I agree, some of that is straightforward because it already exists, meaning there's decision-making models that exist around it already. But what I'm hearing the challenge is, and maybe you guys have solved this, is the big challenge is going to be this autonomous flight, where it's having to communicate with other aircraft, because that's the other piece of this puzzle. Is these systems need to operate in the current operational footprint of a potential, this could be a spot fire that you're attacking from an already established wildfire. An incipient stage fire has many meanings. And so, now you have to launch your solution in a crowded, congested airspace where they're running retardant and bucket drops and intel flights. And that is probably where I think most of the competitors feel a little nervous, is because that technology it's there, but it's not there yet. And the FAA is, as well as they should be, are scared of that because there's no proven. A lot of people out there working on it, but we got to see it work. That's the FAA's response, and I don't blame them, because I'll just say real quick, the coolest thing I saw is I was up in Alaska visiting a partner, and we watched an unmanned fixed wing take off next to a United commercial plane.
Wow.
How cool is that? That's how it
Yeah.
should be.
Yes, it should.
You know what I mean? And in a fire air base, that should be the same thing. We should have unmanned aircraft launching in conjunction with manned aircraft to do different missions and take the hazard away from our pilots, and allow our pilots a little bit more leeway in decision making, because those guys and gals, those folks, if you will, they face a decision that oftentimes results in bad things. Meaning,
Yeah.
they're trying to fight winds and weather and environmental conditions that those aircraft aren't necessarily designed to fly in all the time.
Yeah.
And when you're flying in it all the time, you are pushing that aircraft to its true limit. And as you know, fatalities in fire aviation is one of our highest fatalities.
Absolutely.
We can
Internationally,
eliminate
right?
that.
I
Yeah,
mean,
we can eliminate that, right? Like,
yeah.
why wouldn't we why wouldn't we unman those aircraft and have the pilots doing the tactical decision making, or like you said, helping the AI have a mindset like a fire tactical pilot? It's not eliminating job; it's moving jobs
That's
and
right.
opportunities into different areas where people can have potential for both financial and educational growth. Which right now is a hot shot, a smoke jumper. Once you finish your career, you're done, man. What do you go do? I was fortunate. I was fortunate to get into leadership. A lot of folks in this industry, wildfire, particularly suppression, they have no exit. They were forced into retirement if they're a Forest Service or a federal fire manager early, and that's pretty tough when you're still raising kids and putting kids through college, to be forced to go into retirement because you were a firefighter.
Right. Should have thought about that 20 years ago when you got into it.
Oh, that's evil, man. I mean, sure, sure we could have. You're right.
No, I
We
mean,
could
it's
have.
like, launching a startup with no exit strategy or something. Like, well, I don't
No,
know.
no, you're right.
But the fact of the matter is, like, you're enthusiastic to do it, just like a startup, and you say, you know what, we'll figure that part out when we get there.
You do,
Yep.
and
So, so
that's where wildfire fails us, is because uh,
yeah,
in structure fire, for example, policing, other public safety professions, you're a professional. You have a pension, you have a retirement, you have a 401k, you have medical benefits. When you're working as a hotshot or a contractor fire crew, engine crew member, you have none of that. And you're making minimum wage, hoping that overtime supplements that difference. And then you're laid off after 6 months. So,
right.
yeah, you're right. I signed up for it, but it doesn't make it right. It doesn't
Yeah,
make it
no, it
right.
doesn't. And it forces high turnover, and
Yes.
high turnover denies an industry an opportunity for people to develop wisdom, because you have
Yes.
to be doing something for a while to develop wisdom.
That's a
And
great
so that
observation.
shortchanges the entire, fire infrastructure.
Yeah. And obviously, I could go off on the pay scale and the profession, but as you said, I mean, there's so much work to be done.
Well,
I think technology is one of the steps towards fixing some of this. Like, if we could give um, young individuals an opportunity in fire and technology, or fire
yeah,
and science, oh my goodness, right? Like, they
yeah,
could be making a decent wage and have a profession and translatable skills. Translatable skills, because AI and machine learning and UAV technology is gonna it's gonna be our future. It's evident. And so why not give them the opportunity to prove it in this environment, which is awesome.
yeah, right. Advanced things like the concept of the robotic hotshot.
Yeah,
Right? You
right.
you take your wisdom and you sit there at your console, just like some kid, launches drone attacks in Afghanistan from a silo in Wyoming, right? And you've got your avatar out there in the field, but it's actually a real thing, And you're,
Yes.
you're
Yes.
like, okay, you push the button, okay, bring up the axe, bring up the
Right. And you
hose, right? Yeah,
eliminate the human risk. Totally
yeah,
eliminate the human risk.
right. There's no reason for
That
people to be there.
Right, and that is possible. That's the
Yeah,
funny thing is that's possible. XPRIZE hosted an avatar competition a couple of years ago, and they were able to basically now actually one of the winning teams is actually now in the medical industry doing nursing care jobs that they can't staff with
yeah,
avatars, with remote operators. So there's not even autonomy there, but there's the ability for somebody in Indiana to help somebody in California.
yeah,
And that's what I like what you're saying is now we have a group of individuals that are in a safe environment, protected through that virtual reality, and still accomplishing, if not more efficient work, right? Because a
yeah.
machine doesn't need water. A machine isn't
Clean air,
exposed to 100-degree temperatures, and
right?
we have a medevac. Now, granted, this is crazy talk, right? To most, I mean, I could hear all the hotshots wanting to beat me up now, but the reality is how much longer can we be glorified gardeners? That's all we are. We take
High
our
speed
Pulaskis
gardeners.
out, and then my second question to the audience is, I've been on type one disasters, obviously, hurricanes, floods, whatever. So, would we ever, as disaster managers, ask 1,000 firemen and women to line up on the ocean to stop a hurricane?
Right.
No, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So why do we as a culture, a society, expect 1,000 men and women to go to a fire camp and then go out and line up in front of the fire to put it out? And the fire is no different. It's a natural disaster at that point. It is not an incipient stage
It's a weather
destructive
phenomena,
wildfire.
right?
Yeah,
Just
it is a natural disaster, like a flood, like a hurricane, like a tornado. So it's definitely a mind shift. And technology, I think, can help us get there.
yeah. I mean, in some countries they might stack people to block a flood. Uh, but now that we're not taking their drones anymore, I don't know. So, but yeah, I mean, it's like different cultures really do place different values on human life, and there are cultures where they say sacrificing a bunch of people for the greater good. Yeah, that's something we're willing to do. Not in America though. We
Well,
or at
I
least
don't know.
if we do it less overtly.
Yeah, I would tell you a horror story as a fire manager. I was in a public meeting. I won't tell you where, I won't tell you when, but I was in a public meeting post fire, a large fire that resulted in hundreds of homes lost. And I'll never forget. It changed my whole perspective on my job. Is when a homeowner stood up. They had lost their home, and obviously a lot of emotions, right? You give them
Right.
that card, right? But they stood up and said, "It is your job to die for my house, and my house burned down because you guys left. You would not stay there and protect it." What the biscuit? Like
Seriously.
but that's the kind
Wow.
of emotions we're talking about. Now,
Yeah.
granted, I'm sure you talked to that person today. It's not what they meant. It was emotional. But just to recognize early in my career that this is the type of emotion we're going to be dealing with, and expectations that we are red, shiny fire trucks with fire hydrants, and we could drive to every fire, and we should have all as much water as we want to put out fire.
Right.
It doesn't happen like that. And people are just now starting to understand that because now they're affected by wildfire. They've been evacuated. Now, all of a sudden, it's like, yeah, I get it. Like a fire truck couldn't even get into my driveway. I didn't even think about that.
Right.
Dang
And
it.
yeah, and fire resources are um, allocated according to some statistic. At any given time, whatever. 1% of 1% of the homes in the community will be on fire, and therefore 12 fire trucks is sufficient to serve this area. Like in Boulder, we have 3 ambulances at any given time, and they're thinking, well, the likelihood we're going to need more than 3 ambulances, pretty low, until you have a mass casualty event, and 24, during COVID, right? And the hospital is designed to handle a normal
Yep.
sickness load. And then all of a sudden, something happens and they're just completely overrun and not prepared. And the same thing in fire. You get a wildfire, everybody's house is on fire. There's no
Yep.
way to respond that. Then
I-
how do
I've
you even
watched
prioritize?
I've watched more homes burn down by 6-inch flame lengths, especially in
Mhm.
Boulder, by the way,
Mhm.
because homeowners did do most of their mitigations and they created some defensible space, but we did not have enough resources, human beings in fire
Yeah.
trucks, to get to every single home. It's just impossible. And that's where technology can solve the problem. Imagine an autonomous fire truck or an
Yeah.
autonomous tracked vehicle or an aerial vehicle that delivers that same protective, if not better, protection to that subdivision than the 3 fire trucks that we have to give that subdivision. I mean, I can't tell you the resource problem. You described it well. It's terrible, and it's getting worse because we aren't able to recruit new firefighters. Volunteers are dropping off like, they don't see value in what they're doing anymore. We aren't able to give them the things that used to mean a lot to them, and so we got to change this. And again,
Yeah.
I'm not saying robots are going to fix everything. What I'm saying is we are not using that resource. That's an untapped resource.
Right.
Why we use everything else? Why wouldn't we use autonomy and robots? And it doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah. And I think in some ways, saying, well, we don't have enough resources to handle all these fires because we don't have enough firefighters. That's kind of like saying we don't have enough electricity because we can't get enough coal miners.
Yeah,
Well, maybe
great.
there's a new
Yeah,
technology that where you can,
yep.
right? You can establish you can meet the need without more manpower.
Yeah, and my statement, as you know, was more about what we're currently doing, which is
Yeah, that's right.
dependent on human beings and government, local, state funding to buy stuff to put out
Yeah,
fires. But we're
right.
not looking at the problem way out in front of it, which is, what we've started to describe is changing a culture of 100 years. I'd say 60 for sure.
At
I'd go
least
back
100.
even 100. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
right. I mean, the axe is what, 8,000-year-old technology, and that's still the symbol of the fire department, right?
Right, right. And
Yeah,
that we're going to be releasing some new stickers for the XPRIZE competition and patches, and I think you'll enjoy this. And it is the flame logo, typical fire logo, but there's drones and satellites on it.
yeah,
And
great.
that and that's yeah, right. There should be, along with a firefighter, along with a fire truck, along with a heavy aircraft, all of it should be there. Not just pieces of it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Let me ask you one semi off topic question. We talk about defensible space in this area a lot. Um, right, we don't want radiant heat within 30 some odd feet of your house and, you know, ember intrusion, etc. Um, is the idea of calling it defensible space dangerous because it implies that people should stay and defend their home? It's only defensible if someone is defending it, right? Like
That's an interesting question.
if it's right non-flammable area, I could understand that. Low fuel zone, I could understand that. But defensible means it sets up the idea like, oh, we built this area so that you can stay here and defend it. Is that not
Let me just, I want to
taking
answer the,
people away from the idea that they should evacuate and not defend?
yeah, and I want to just start with, just right out in front of that is, there's a couple areas of the country, you happen to live in one of them, that face different environmental conditions that are undefensible, unstoppable when fire is introduced to that ecosystem. In other words,
Yeah.
wind-driven fire.
Yep.
So one thing homeowners need to know is that when they're building their defensible space, I'll use the word cautiously, they're not building it for the fire event that we all see on TV, right?
Right.
That's nothing's going to stop that. And a lot of homeowners get frustrated post fire because I did my defensible space. Well, two things happened that why it didn't work. And you just described one of them, I'll describe the other is extreme fire went through your subdivision, and didn't matter what you did, nothing was going to save your house, period. Like, period. You have to understand that. The second scenario is extreme fire went around your subdivision and then began to creep into your subdivision, backing fire, as I described earlier, and we did not have enough resources to support your defensible space, because there, as you said, unless it is 100% non-combustible, there's no such thing as create defensible space and leave a structure alone. That's not how it works.
Yeah.
Your part as a homeowner is creating the environment that we could work in safely.
There you go.
Our part as firefighters is to get there and use that environment to our advantage to protect ourselves foremost, and homeowners need to understand ourselves foremost, then property. And so all those messages, I know that's a lot there, but in incident management, we have 3 priorities always: life safety, incident stabilization, property conservation. Yeah. So I may end up, this is terrible, but I may end up sacrificing a dozen homes because I'm trying to stabilize an incident. In other words, save 2,000 homes over
that's
the ridge.
Reasonable.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, if you give me defensible space around those 12 homes, now I have an opportunity to create a fire break and not only save your homes, but the 2,000 homes over here. So I think that's the part that we miss as prevention technicians, if you will. In other words, we're out there talking to homeowners, mitigation specialists. They don't explain the whole cycle I just explained. This is your part, this is our part, and these are the reasons why it will work or won't work. And now the homeowner has an educated view of the work they're going to do and the money they're going to spend. And, how many times do we require cisterns be put in the mountains at homes to the cost of tens of thousands of dollars? And then we use that water to fight your neighbor's fire. We do.
Yeah.
Because they didn't do their defensible space.
Right.
They didn't have their cistern. So now if their house catches on fire, your house is going to burn down.
Yeah.
So I have to go now use all your resources to protect that first house that did nothing to save the entire subdivision. And people, they get mad about that, right? I would.
Yeah.
Why are you using
people,
my water?
I mean, isn't this why it's mandatory reading when you're 5 years old, that you read The 3 Little Pigs? Right? You put the effort in up front to, avoid the heavy risk later.
Right. But, you can't make people do it, at least in most cases. And we fail as a society, not just fire managers, We fail to understand the cycle of everything, and that's where we need to get the story a little better. And, XPRIZE does a good job of that. We are able to, again, take a neutral stance on a lot of sensitive topics, or a really strong stance, such as climate change, and say, here's the science. Don't believe it, or if you don't, we don't care, but here's the science, and that's what we're going to follow. We're going to follow the science.
Apolitical, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you talked about, sacrificing homes to create that fire break. That was never more clear than the Fort McMurray fire, where they literally ran bulldozers through neighborhoods to try to, they dozed to houses to remove them. But does the fire, I'm curious, does the concept of the fire break really still hold when vast areas are dry tinder and winds drive embers over, tens and dozens of miles?
Yeah, let's be honest. Fire, same scenario, right? Fire breaks. Yeah. In extreme fire growth and conditions, a fire break is useless. The size it would have to be is impossible.
Miles.
Miles. Exactly. Miles. And the resources to protect that miles of safe space, because that fire can break through, right? There's going to be some anyway.
If it can jump an 8-lane highway, it's going to jump that.
It could jump a lake. I mean, you know what I mean? I mean, a water lake. So my point is, to your question is, oh gosh, I'm going to just create a lot of hate mail, but fire breaks are great if they're used in conjunction with other tools. An example, I have a fire break protecting a subdivision. Now I'm going to run a heavy aircraft across that fire break. Now I've added retardant to it. Now
Yeah.
I'm going to bring in 4 hotshot crews, and they're going to go in there and improve around the homes and create a little chink line, and then they're going to fire off. In other words, they're going to burn from that
Yep.
fire break back to the main fire.
Right.
That's the strategy.
Yes.
Homeowners need to understand that. A fire break is not the fire's coming at us and it stopped the fire.
Yeah. Right.
That's not, but that's what we're sold. That's what homeowners are sold.
Yeah. They
Let
get
us put in
fire
this fire
armor.
break. Yeah, let's put in this fire break. It's the value of it and the success of it is dependent on all those factors working together I just described.
Yeah.
And then if you do add extreme wildfire to it, it's all gone. It doesn't matter. It's
right.
We're not going to put firefighters in that fire break during an extreme fire event. And if
Right.
we are, they're going to be in what is called a safety zone, watching the fire because it's too dangerous to attack.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let me ask you about the economic model here, because it is what you're not allowed to say, right? But it's that the economics of fire suppression are inversely built related to the mission at hand. Like, no, you get a fire and you get it, knock that incipient fire out in the first hour. Well, there goes your overtime, right? There goes your drops. There goes your bulldozer line. There goes your, the cafeteria services. Like, everyone loses money on a fire that goes out fast. So shouldn't we have a situation where the economic incentives are aligned with the mission?
Wow, that's pretty deep. Again, as
it's not untrue. I mean, no one would like to think that would be anyone's motive. But if you just trace the money, there's more money to be made in an active fire.
I would challenge you to say, again, let's talk holistically, though, before we get to that sort of conversation. Where did it start? Well, it started when we have the land management agencies managing wildfire on private and state land.
Yeah.
That doesn't make sense, number one,
right.
because the land management agencies have a whole different charge. They're not funded to fight wildfire. They're funded to protect the forest.
Mm-hmm.
And all their funding comes postseason, right? You know that, right? There's no big bucket of money for wildfire. There's just, that's what it costs. We got to find the money.
Yeah.
That's it. So first I would challenge us, let's get the responsibility of fighting wildfire, defending homes to the right people and agencies and organizations. Once we get it there, then we could talk about the best way to use the money. What is the best way to use the money? And then we create that transition of economics, right? So instead of the contractor being there to feed 1,000 firefighters during a terrible loss event, we have the contractor come in to feed 1,000 firefighters for mitigation or whatever positive activity. So we just shift the dollars and eliminate all the risk.
That makes
simple.
the most sense, right?
Right.
Although firefighters are trained to put out fires, they sign up to put out fires. They don't sign up to trim my lawn.
But I tell you what, one of my passions again is prescribed fire, and if we could start entering mass acreage prescribed fire on the landscape with these resources, I'm not talking 1,000 acres. I'm not talking 10,000. I'm talking 100,000 acre prescribed fires. Where we could manage them and control them, and they're not destructive, or maybe they are, but they need to be. Meaning, it's a lodgepole stand that's a 100-year stem replacement fire event. Let's do it. Let's reintroduce the natural disturbance under our terms, our terms, and the cost of that has already been proven to be significantly lower than post-disaster. Because with post-disaster, you don't have just the response cost, right? Which is billions of dollars.
Yep.
You now have the recovery cost, which is now billions of dollars.
Yeah, right.
So we can eliminate think about it. We can eliminate those costs
Yeah.
and move them up here and create a whole new industry. So all those vendors, all those contractors that you're talking about, all those firefighters, there's actually jobs for them.
Yeah.
But there's positive jobs. There's positive opportunities. There's not disaster destructive jobs. There's year-round employment for these firemen and women.
Well, part of that is just America, right? We're just a reactive culture, not a proactive culture, right? There's no money for prevention, and there's no cap on the money for response.
That's it. You said
Right.
it, right? I
Yeah.
mean, that's
So what if
unfortunately
we were
it.
to shift, right? So, whether we accept that idea or not, that there's a reverse economic incentive for fire suppression, the people who really do carry the burden of that are the insurance companies, right? When the fire sweeps through here, hey, the firefighters they all get paid whether they save the house or they don't. Hopefully they don't if it puts them in danger, but the insurance company's on the hook then for that. So why wouldn't the people who have the most to lose financially, the insurance companies, get out ahead of both the pre-mitigation and the response? I would, right? If I was at an insurance company, I'd tell the firefighters, go home. We're sending in our own firefighters. We're going to manage this risk because we actually have financial, we got money on the game here.
Well,
Uh,
let me give you two examples of something more positive.
yeah.
One is American Family Insurance has joined XPRIZE in our effort. So they
Oh,
are
great.
actually one of our sponsors, and they are actually very active in the prize. They're very interested in what we could do and how we could solve it. In addition, PG&E. So you mentioned
Oh,
insurance
great.
companies. What about public utility providers?
Yeah.
How about that power shutdown in Boulder the other day? How many people were upset? So how could
Well,
they
they
win? How
shut it
could
down
you
during the few hours
right?
of fire, and then they took a week to get it back on. But
Well, but what do you expect? They're turning on a grid. Have you
yeah,
ever?
no,
The
I don't
question
know.
is, did you ever ask? Did anybody ever explain to the homeowners the consequences of these actions they wanted? Why are we not shutting down the power when these high wind events
Yeah.
occur?
Okay, but a little
Okay,
communication from
well,
Excel. Hey, we're
in
going to
both
do
ways.
this, and here's
Both
what it's
ways,
going to.
though, right? Both
Yeah.
ways. Both ways. See, that's the one thing I've learned in
Sure.
life, right? If I'm
Yeah.
not getting the answers I want or I need, I'm going to go seek them. And I would challenge homeowners and citizens on the call to say, if you don't have the full picture, you need to ask the questions,
Yeah.
and
Right.
the same with utility companies. There is a messaging piece there that, hey, we should do this. Going back to the insurance problem, though, I will say this: towards the end of my career, I went to a conference about wildfire, and I spoke, and then I went to a session with insurance providers, and they were speaking about the risk in insurance. And this was 10 years ago, so I imagine the statistics have changed a bit, but not much. But at that time, there was so much more loss exponentially around hurricanes, floods than wildfire that
Yeah.
it's not even, it
Not on the radar.
wasn't even on the radar. Now, that's one thing. And in private industry, yeah, you have to make business decisions on how you're going to survive and what's important to you. So, many people would ask, well, why aren't they involved in wildfire? Because their bigger losses right now are in flood and hurricanes, right? And
Yeah, but you can't mitigate that.
we're still building on the beach. We can mitigate it. Yeah, we
Okay.
can. We still are allowing people to build in the flood zone. We can mitigate it.
Yeah, that's
Just
true. Right.
so it's all of our problems, is what I'm saying. So it's not the insurance company's problem. In fact, being an insurance company, they took that, no pun intended, risk on. That's their business model. Their
Yeah.
business model is, I'm going to insure you in the event that something bad happens. Well, something bad happened. That's part of their business model. So I would just challenge us to quit. And I'm not saying you're doing this, but we often blame people and they're part of the problem. They're not helping. It's because we're not talking holistically about the problem. We're talking
Yeah.
about individual components of it. And so, I do believe the insurance companies can care. I believe they're helping, believe it or not. The IBHS Center, where they're doing fire research, is an example of that. They've all partnered. They have a fire research center where they burn every day, building
Yeah.
materials, different all
Well,
kind
that's
of
such a
stuff.
cool facility.
Right. And so they do care, and they do have a vested interest, as you said, financial vested interest in seeing this problem solved. And so, unfortunately, because nobody's providing hope except XPRIZE,
Mm-hmm.
they're running from the problem because they're making good business decisions. Wouldn't you? If you were losing billions of dollars in one area of your business, wouldn't you think about shutting it down? In other words, I'm not going to insure homes in California anymore. I'm not going to insure homes in Colorado anymore. That's a good business decision.
Right. I mean, it's pretty broad strokes, though, because if you look at a more granular level, there are some properties in California and Colorado that are virtually no risk, and there's others at very high risk, and they basically take all that revenue potential off the table when they eliminate a whole state.
I can't question their business model.
Yeah.
To your point, though, think about the work to get to that point. Of
Yeah.
which
Right.
homes are
No.
safe. I mean, we've done a lot of those damages or those severity, hazard assessments, but those models change yearly.
Sure.
Especially in fuel models like Manzanita or quick growing brush, you could have a fire event, and 5 years later, you'll have even worse overgrown trees and brush.
Yeah.
So it's the natural environment is what I'm trying to get at, and to just identify one or two homes that are protected or in a safe area,
Yeah. Or
it's not
neighborhoods, I guess.
realistic. It's not
Right.
realistic. Um, and I'm not, again, defending insurance companies. I get frustrated when people start blaming different groups. It's like yeah, they're part of the problem, but they're also part of the solution.
That's right. I mean,
You know,
kind of everyone's part of the problem.
yeah, right.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's right. You're
But
responding to the fire. You respond to the fire, and you're driving this big, diesel-driven truck. I mean, right? So
yeah, exactly, right. We could go
right.
down that road, but on a good note, I think that's where we come in. X Prizes, we're looking at the holistic situation here, and we're trying to leverage technology, leverage financial incentive, leverage partnerships in a safe space to solve a big problem, and it's worked. That's the cool thing is and
It worked.
I do believe, as you said, and we started with at the beginning of the conversation, no matter what happens in the XPRIZE Wildfire competition, no matter a winner or no winner, we are going to push this industry to its absolute best and force everybody to come along with us.
Yep.
And in the end, we might not have an autonomous robot digging fire line. Okay. But we might have new technologies to keep firemen and women safer, to
Absolutely.
protect properties, and to avoid these disasters. And that I truly believe is possible. I've seen it. I've seen it. One technology I'll share with your listeners, which is the coolest thing, and I'm not trying to be anything about any team, but I had witnessed recently somebody who's using sound waves to put out fire.
Oh yeah.
And that is amazing technology for your listeners.
Yes, it is. Right.
It solves so many problems that people don't understand on the backside, the logistical firefighting problems and why we can't protect homes. Because if you eliminate the need for water,
Yeah.
and I always said this about the competition, I always said, whoever's going to win this competition is going to create a new water.
Yeah.
It's
Right.
not
Or a much
necessarily
more efficient use of water.
way more efficient. You know
Way
what I
more,
mean?
yeah.
Like, we're not talking about a surfactant here. We're talking about
No.
or foam. We're talking about something that's a game changer.
Right.
Which now you look at we just launched a $100 million water scarcity prize in XPRIZE, and these all relate, don't they? There's not enough water
Sure.
on the planet, right? And now we're
Right.
using that valuable water to do what? Try to fight wildfire and blah blah
Yeah.
blah. So we can be part of a bigger change.
Yeah. And I hope that the folks who are working on that sonic, fire weapon, I could just imagine someone saying, "Well, you can't use that, because the sound waves are going to disturb the whale mating rituals." And this, who knows? But
It's always possible, right?
right, there's always,
But
yeah. I mean, there's always trade-offs.
yes.
But ultimately, people make the trade, based on what's best for them.
Yeah, and if we did that collectively, what was best for us, I think we really
Yeah,
could make
us.
some changes,
Yeah,
and
we sure could.
but that's just an example of technology that, again, it's there, it exists.
Yep.
It's being repurposed, and I
Yep.
think that's what we're seeing a lot of. Is there's a lot of technology that just hasn't been introduced to wildfire.
Yeah. I think
It's
that
not.
team is trying to figure out how to scale that, right? That it works on a, on a class A fire, in your garage, in a
Yeah,
limited.
I don't know the details. I just
Yeah. But
saw some.
trying to get it to work over hundreds of yards and stuff is the challenge that
Right,
they're
right. So
working on.
that's where these, as you know, as a competing team, we really encourage what we call matchmaking. So one
Yeah.
of our competitors said in track A, this is a competition, Jay, but it is a collaboration.
Yes.
And that stuck with me because
Yep.
uh, that's how we are going to solve this problem
Yeah,
is
no, that's why
together.
they encourage teams, not
Yes,
individual participants,
yes.
because it forms
And
these relationships. Yeah.
you'll see during the team summits coming up. We have a Track A team summit coming up in Australia during AFAC, which is one of their big fire events in Sydney, and then we'll be doing Team B's team summit, location to be announced. But during those team summits, we bring all those resources to the teams, investors, um, opportunities to meet other teams and pitch your ideas and collaborate and build your solutions together. Um, Professionals in the industry, like the highest, people you may have never have access to in your whole entire professional career. We're going to bring them to you because they want to solve the problem too.
Yeah. No, that's great. I'm wondering, when I look at the list of the participants in the X Prize, uh, you know, what maybe I'm not seeing the whole list, but what seems to be missing to me are huge companies with mass assets and great technological capabilities. And I
XPRIZE is remember, we're a foundation and
Yeah,
we have overarching support
yeah,
for the foundation. And then
right.
each competition, if you will, has its own different sponsors. So you're only seeing a piece of the support mechanism, which is the direct sponsors, Minderoo, the Gordon Betty Moore Foundation. Those are the direct sponsors,
I
right?
meant entrants, though. I meant
Excuse me.
competitors. I meant competitors. Like,
Oh, competitors.
why wouldn't we have a competitor like Lockheed Martin, General Dynamics, Raytheon,
Well,
Hughes Aerospace?
Lockheed is one of our sponsors, so that's
Yeah,
why they
yep,
chose to sponsor it. They talked about. In fact, I'm not sure if they were gonna. We were gonna allow their employees to participate, not as Lockheed Martin
yeah,
representatives, basically
right,
conflict of interest. But to your point, there is an undertone that is not visible, and it's positive undertone that because it comes off negative when you say it like that, but of support by large organizations, by
okay,
very very large companies and organizations. And for teams, that should be an incentive to understand that when you finish this journey with us, you're going to have access to these organizations and companies that you would not have access to
right. You're on their
without.
radar now.
Yes, you're not only on their radar, but you are in front of them. You will have an opportunity to shake hands with them. These are all the
Right.
things that, like, being part of the XPRIZE competition, sort of like we hear after from our teams that compete. It wasn't, oh, that $11 million made all the difference for us.
Right.
It was that one opportunity to meet that one company representative changed
Yep.
everything for us. Or that one investor
Yeah.
you introduced me to changed everything for us. And there's testimonials that you could read about. So
No, I
yeah,
believe
you
that.
you would say why doesn't like XYZ tech company Tesla? Let's say that, why doesn't Tesla come in and sponsor the autonomy part of it? Well, Tesla's there, and there's other organizations like Tesla and companies that are there throughout our foundation, through our partnerships and other areas that will bleed into this competition and be the magnification that we need.
Well, super. Boy, I rarely go over an hour on this, but what we're discussing is just so fascinating, and the work that you're doing is so valuable. That super. I think we're gonna just have to do a part two, Jay. Uh, we'll,
Well,
we'll do it
thank
in
you.
town.
Yeah,
We'll meet
thanks for
over
the
at the fire department.
opportunity. Yeah, yeah, thanks for the opportunity to discuss. And yeah, I'm passionate, and I try to caution my words at times because I'm here to represent myself, but in other ways also XPRIZE. And I just want to emphasize that we are a safe space, politically, socially, and we're just trying to solve the problem. And it's a holistic problem that we all need to solve. And that's why you see the diversity of partners and the diversity of teams like your team and yourself. And if you need anything, let me know because I want to see you
Thank you.
win. I want every team to win because
So
that's
do
why
I.
we're doing this, right?
Like,
Like
no matter
it's
who wins the
yeah,
prize, like we all
yes,
win
we
because
all win.
right,
And
our homes and neighborhoods and loved ones don't perish in fires.
yes,
So
that's the exciting part is we
that
all
that,
win.
that
So,
yeah, that's why we're
but
all
yeah,
in.
I'd love to come back and talk, and maybe we could time it after one of the team advancement announcements.
Okay.
And I would hope one of your teams would be there, but that's out of my control. But
I hope
if
so too,
if
though.
not, we could still share the love with these other teams. But just think about that. And again, thanks for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Jay Stalnacker with XPRIZE and my neighbor right down the road, well, up the road, I guess, slightly north of Boulder. Thanks so much for joining me on the fire break. It was really great to chat with you.
See ya.
You bet. Well, you've been listening to the beyond an hour of the fire break because we have such a great guest here in Jay Stalnacker and the work he's doing with XPRIZE, and all of the work that he did to get on XPRIZE's radar. Going back through his whole career. So you got to benefit all of that in just 1 hour. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you at the next one. I'm Steve Wolf. We're sponsored by Team Wildfire. See you on the next show. Take care.